Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Goodness. In the recent times, a destination in Sri Lanka has received a free tourism campaign. Disagree? According to the Cambridge Dictionary, any publicity is a good publicity. There's no such thing as a bad publicity. Now, let's look at this. Arugam Kuda, the mostly known as the Arugam Bay, has been pinned by the international community in the recent times as a place where Israel and its war with its neighbors have potentially been extended into. This is how the story unfolded. One fine day, US Embassy in Colombo issued a travel warning. The embassy claimed it has received credible information warning of an attack targeting popular tourist location in the Arugam Bay area. The embassy imposed a travel restriction on embassy personnel for Arugam Bay effective immediately until further notice. US citizens were strongly urged to avoid the Arugam Bay area until further notice. Now, this appears in the local media, which demanded the Sri Lankan official to respond to a potential threat. It raised many questions as to why a news of such nature was leaked by a foreign agency, the US Embassy first, while no reports came from the official channels of the Sri Lankan government. Is it because the new government that got appointed lacks experience in handling the communication around potential threat to the national security? Or did they think the focus should be on the investigation first and any premature announcement will create unnecessary tensions among citizens and tourists? Or did the US stood by its commitment to its national interests and didn't want to wait for the local officials to release the outcome of the preliminary investigations? Or did the US act so early to protect its ally, Israel, by issuing early warning for Israeli tourists to leave the country before things get ugly? As they were aware from the Easter Sunday bombing, the later involvement may have an impact on them. You might wonder, what is this to do with them? Post the Easter attack, many of the city's residents questioned why Batticaloa was the only location outside the capital that has been hit. There were also questions on why the Eastern Church attacker had targeted a small Protestant congregation. US and Israel may have done some homework on why that particular church got targeted. In their analysis, they may have done some correlation. Was that church a target because it has the Hebrew name Zion, often used as a synonym for Jerusalem, as well as the land of the Israel as a whole? Since it's also an evangelist church, may have had an affiliation with US. It is also important to note, United States has a larger proportion of evangelists in the world. Anyway, where did this incident start? The report says a controversial Israeli community center, Chabad house, was believed to have been the target by the terrorist attack, confirms the Sri Lankan police. Suspects were being detained and interrogated. Immediately, Israel's National Security Council called on Israelis in Sri Lanka to immediately leave tourist areas and warned citizens currently on the island to avoid openly exhibiting anything that could identify you as Israeli, such as T-shirt with Hebrew writing or any other symbol that disclose your religion or nationality. The stark warning came as more diplomatic missions on the island alerted their citizens of a potential terrorist attack targeting tourists on the island. Germany and Canada joined the US and UK, Australia and Russia in issuing urgent travel advisories. Sri Lanka's Foreign Minister Vijitha Herath meanwhile held a hurried press conference in Colombo, where he reinstated the security had been beefed up and claimed tourists did not have to fear. In his speech, he also mentioned the Security Council meeting during the last meeting flagged this situation. We were informed of locations such as Arugambe, Veligama and Hikaduwa that required added security, which we provided. We didn't feel the need to alert citizens until we were certain of a situation and necessary action had been taken. Harris also refuted that Indian intelligence provided information on the suspects and added that they were informed by other diplomatic missions of the alert that was to be issued. Later, the Sri Lankan government reportedly ruled out any links between the recent incident in Arugambe and extremism, and categorizing it instead as an incident of organized crime. The Sri Lankan delegation, which met with the US officials later, raised concerns about the travel advisory issued by the US inquiring its necessities, given that the incident was unrelated to extremism. The delegation formally requested the lifting of the advisory, citing the absence of any major incidents. 6 suspects were arrested, including a Maldivian national. Initial investigations have revealed that an Iranian national had contacted these suspects with the intention of inciting unrest, allegedly offering them financial support. So, what is Chabad House and why did it get this much of attention? Chabad is a religious Jewish organization, specifically a particular brand of Orthodox Judaism. Chabad houses were founded by Shulshim, New York-based organization affiliated with the Chabad Lubavitch Hasidic movement, upon the request of the 7th Lubavitch Rebbe, and can now be found in almost every city around the world. It continues, adding that they often serve as a place for Jewish travelers searching for a warm and welcoming community, as well as assist with kosher food and other religious needs. It was reported in 2023 that there were 3,500 Chabad institutions around the world, and there were like 5,000 Chabad centers in 100 countries. It was also reported there had recently been tensions between Jewish tourists visiting Chabad House and the base Muslim majority population. Post the investigation, government officials have said it has increased security at the Chabad House Jewish Community Center in Arugambe. Why was the Chabad in Sri Lanka became the target out of all the other places? Are the Chabad houses in other countries have ever been a target? In India, Pakistani gunmen who stormed through Mumbai on a 60-hour killing spree in 2008. The attacks on the Chabad Center and other locations in India's financial capitals left 166 people dead. Among them were the 6 people from the Orthodox Jewish Center. 2 Islamic terror suspects detained in India were plotting to carry out series of bombing and has carried out surveillance of the Chabad house in Mumbai. They were found to be in possession of explosives, drone equipment, laptops, incriminating books written in Arabic. Among the documents found in a phone were pictures of Chabad house in Mumbai and its GPS coordinates, etc. In Germany, the German court sentenced a German-Iranian man on 2 years and 9 months in prison for planning an arson attack on a synagogue, Jewish house of worship, on behalf of the Iranian state. After learning of the security measures around the synagogue in Bochum, he threw a Molotov cocktail in a building next door. The High Regional Court in Düsseldorf found the man admitted throwing the device at the building according to the court's ruling. Athens, Greece. Among recent alleged targets, a building that houses a Jewish center and kosher restaurant in downstairs Athens. A Pakistani named Shahid Fahar Abbas recruited an old acquaintance living in Greece and directed him to attack the site. Investigators alleged in documents submitted to the judicial authorities in the case and viewed by Reuters, has said Abbas told his contact that he was working for a group that would pay some 15,000 euros per kill. So these are the few, nations that such things kind of took off, things got identified, and the list continues. Mossad director David Barnes said, probably last year, that over the previous years, Israeli intelligence has worked with international partners to disrupt 27 teams that tried to mount attacks abroad that were orchestrated, masterminded, and directed by Iran. Israel declined to provide details. Also in the past, Israel declined to comment on the case or other Mossad activities that have been undertaken. The Iranian mission to the United Nations in New York told that the Islamic Republic harbors neither the intent nor the plan to engage in assassination or abduction operation, whether in the West or in any other country. It calls such allegations fabrication meant to divert attention from the atrocities committed by the Israeli regime in the conflict in Gaza. Israel's former head of Interpol told Iran International that it is a very easy place for Iran because Iranian agents can meet Israelis and make them a target there. There is some more to this story if you are willing to look deep. There are local Israeli businesses who are illegally running in Sri Lanka, with stalking a serious security threat that could derail Sri Lanka's tourism recovery efforts, some say. Local anger seems to be pointed not at those who may be behind a terror plot, but at the growing number of Israeli tourists who have flocked to the eastern province tourist spot. Former MP Rehan Jayawickramage said, "To those Israelis fueling this instability, let me make one thing clear. You cannot forcefully and illegally occupy our land as you have done elsewhere," he said, calling on Israelis to respect the laws of this land. While some Muslim traders have an opposing view that Israeli tourists support businesses here and bring in dollars that help the country's boosted foreign reserves, we are just recovering after a cumulative impact of the Easter Sunday bombings in 2019, the pandemic, and then our country's economic crisis. Sending away willing tourists will not help us, they said. So, is the threat to Sri Lanka and its citizen is completely removed, or are we in for some close calls in the near future? Is the threat to Sri Lanka and its citizen is completely removed, or are we in for some close calls in the near future? Beyond the humanitarian catastrophe that is led by Israel in Gaza and Iran, and its Cold War with Lebanon, Jordan continues. Various Sri Lankan governments have been pro-Israeli supporters. It is very evident in the partnership that we formed between both governments. Israeli human rights lawyer Itay Mack mentioned in one of his articles that Israeli weapons, including surveillance, unmanned aerial vehicles, and other military equipment, were likely used by the Sri Lankan army in atrocities against civilians during the decades-long war against the liberation tigers of Tamil Eelam. The Sri Lankan government also purchased combat aircraft and battleships from Israel and were used in the commission of war crime. So he called for criminal investigation into the involvement of Israeli companies, officials, and individuals in the war crimes committed during the Sri Lankan civil war. Mack has accused the United Nations and the Western countries of failing to hold accountable those responsible for horrific atrocities in Sri Lanka's northeast. Western governments and human rights organizations often criticize China and Pakistan for providing weapons and financial aid that helped the Sri Lankan government defeat the LTTE. However, little attention has been paid to the role the Israelis played in the Sri Lankan civil war. Israel and Sri Lanka formally established diplomatic relations in 1956, but Sri Lanka broke all ties several times due to lobbying from the Arab world. However, when the Tamil insurgency gathered momentum in the 1980s, cooperation between the Sri Lankan and Israeli governments grew. It was during the presidency of Jayawardena government allows Israel to maintain a special interest section under the protection of the United States Embassy from 1984. In the 80s, Israeli international agents were training the Sri Lankan counterparts. At the time, late Sri Lanka's National Security Affairs Minister, Lalit Atalathmudali, told that the training programs were aimed at overhauling the organizations of intelligence gathering, building an effective information gathering network, and training a paramilitary unit to combat the Tamil insurgents. According to the Israeli analyst Shlomi Yas, the Sri Lankan army purchased advanced night vision and communication technology, artillery coordination system, and Gabriel C-to-C missiles. In addition, it acquired drones and ground stations, flak jackets, ammunition, thousands of Uzi submarine guns, and Galil assault weapons, mortars, 155mm cannons from Israel. However, it was Sri Lanka's Navy and the Air Force that benefited greatly from Israeli weapons. As early as the 1950s, Sri Lanka bought Miznak and Mizdag naval vessels from Israel. So Israel froze defense exports to Sri Lanka in the mid-2000s, prior to the last phase of the war against the LTTE, because it feared that Iran, which was close to Mahinda Rajapaksa government, would get its hands on Israeli technologies. So, where do we stand in a larger conflict which has a local impact? In 2023, Sri Lanka has signed a deal with Israel that will see Colombo send 10,000 farm workers to the country, after as many as 20,000 Palestinian agricultural workers were banned by the Israeli government. Through Sri Lankan officials have repeatedly called for two-state solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict, which Sri Lanka's former president advocated for even floating four-state idea and voted in the United Nations Greater Assembly resolution that Israel condemned. Colombo rushed to assist the country as it launched the military action. There will be no more Palestinian workers from Gaza, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced. So what happened after that? As many as 20,000 Palestinian agricultural workers had permits revoked and 1,000 more have been detained by Israeli security forces or forcibly expelled to Gaza. Sri Lanka already has 4,500 workers from the island employed in Israel. Most of them are working in the home care sector. According to the spokesperson for the Sri Lankan Foreign Employment Bureau, there are about 8,000 Sri Lankans in Israel at present. So, will we be an ongoing target as we continue to stand with Israel in one capacity or another? Maybe. As some say, there's a huge presence of Mossad intelligence officers roaming freely in Sri Lanka, which the governments choose to overlook, which automatically raises the risk for this country. And also, there is a spike in roles such as hired assassins across the world, where people could be hired to cause unrest by the players of the game to instill their political agenda. There could be people signing up in the future, from here as well. So, I think it goes back to the question, will we be an ongoing target as we continue to stand with Israel in one capacity or another? I will leave you here. And I will meet you in another episode of Goodness. Until then, you look after yourself. Thank you.
Civil society groups
position as far as the pandemic situation is concerned.
Sri Lanka. There was no evidence There was no science evidence.
Only cremation was introduced as the form of disposal of the body.
I don't think anywhere in the world they did PCR on dead bodies.
They are asking for their last rights. Their last right you are taking away for politics.
வீட்டில் இருந்து எங்கள் பிள்ளைக்கு எப்படி வந்துட்டதால் கேட்டது கேள்வி அவங்களுக்கு பதில் இல்லை. ஐசியில் தான் போடணும், உங்களுக்கு வந்து பார்க்கறதுக்கே மேலானு தான் சொன்னாங்க.
For some reason, you marginalized it.
The state vehemently objected.
Some of the things that we discussed and some of the things that were in the minutes were different.
They were going against the science and they were arguing on the basis of politics.
So because of this disease, other people's lives are in threat. That means we need to look into it. But we need to have very, solid evidence for that.
If the global standards and global institutes can get his advice, why can't we get his advice?
You have referred this subcommittee's report to the main committee, but the main committee chooses to ignore the experts.
When it has become the law of the land, it is the law.
Anyway, someday I'm going to die, but I don't want to die and get burned myself.
It was a blatant violation of the principles of science.